I was about to leave the reformatory when the officer slammed a stack of photos against my face. Once you're out, you know what to say and what not to say. My eyes dropped to the photographs. In them, I was twisted into humiliating poses, covered in wounds. The memories of beatings, the horror of broken fingers, all of it surged back, suffocating me. Those 3 hours were the longest of my life. 3 hours where I tasted every kind of suffering in the world. Back then, I really thought I would die. The officer yanked me up by the hair, forcing my head back. His monstrous face loomed large in front of mine, and I trembled uncontrollably. Fear had already become an instinct I couldn't suppress. I won't say anything. I swear, I won't, I promised. I put on long sleeves and trousers to cover the scars before stepping out of the reformatory. John Crowe was already waiting for me. The look in his eyes carried a faint trace of disgust. Let's go. Any later and we'll be late. I trailed carefully behind him, afraid of doing something wrong. My fingers were too weak. No matter how I tried, I couldn't open the car door. From the driver's seat, John Crowe glanced at me through the rearview mirror, his gaze filled with disdain. Noah Hart, even something this small and you act so pathetic? Looks like this year in there taught you nothing. Or do you still want? Before he could finish, I forced myself to bear the sharp pain, using both hands to pull the door open. Sorry. I'll do better from now on. John Crowe froze for a moment. In the past, I would have clung to him, pouting, acting spoiled until he helped me open the door. But after enduring inhuman torment, I was no longer that Noah Hart. The car drove straight back to the Crowe family villa. A banquet was in full swing inside. Someone pinched their nose dramatically. Isn't this Noah Hart? How did he become so shabby and ugly? I fidgeted nervously with the frayed corner of my shirt, remembering the reflection I'd caught earlier in the rearview mirror. My face sallow, my body frail. John Crowe grabbed my arm and pulled me aside, scolding in a low voice. Noah Hart? How long do you plan on embarrassing me like this? Go change. You still have your piano performance later. Piano? That felt like something from another lifetime. My memory must really be slipping. I had almost forgotten that I was once a celebrated pianist in this country. I silently lifted my hands. They were rough, scarred, nothing like the pale, jade-like fingers I used to have. Could these hands still play the piano? I didn't even have time to react before a maid led me into the walk-in closet. Young Master Hart, Mr. Crowe asked me to help you change into something more appropriate, she said gently, her hands already moving to unfasten the buttons of my shirt. But in an instant, her face overlapped with the officer's face from the reformatory. My blood ran cold. Terror gripped me, and I shoved her away with all my strength. My hands clutched desperately at my chest as I collapsed to my knees on the floor. No, no. Please, don't take off my clothes. Don't take them off. I'll be good. I swear I'll behave. Young master, what's wrong? The maid asked in shock. The commotion was enough to startle John Crowe. He stormed in, his sharp voice cutting through my panic. Noah Hart! What are you throwing a fit about now? That barked command snapped me back to reality. My body still trembled, but I clutched my collar tight and forced my voice to steady. John Crowe, tell them to leave. I don't need their help. I have my own hands, my own feet. I can dress myself. John waved the maid away, his gaze fixed on me from above. There was something almost satisfied in his tone when he said, Seems like that trip did knock some sense into you after all. When the room finally emptied, I glanced down at the scars running across my wrists and arms. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. I chose the most conservative outfit I could find, something completely unlike my old flamboyant style. When I stepped back out, silence fell. Not just John, but every guest around us looked startled. Ignoring the whispers, I walked straight to the grand piano waiting in the center of the hall. My fingers hovered over the keys, trembling from the pain that never really left me. It had been a year since I last touched a piano, but the melodies were still etched into my heart. I knew, though, that my hands would never produce the beauty they once had. The piece came to an end and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Of course, they weren't whispering because I played well, but because I had played so terribly. John's face was dark with anger. He stepped close, his voice low and biting. Noah Hart, playing like this, are you deliberately trying to humiliate me? I'm sorry. I shut the piano lid and fled, stumbling away as though chased by ghosts. When I locked the door behind me and curled into the corner of the room, the faint sound of music drifted in from outside. The piano again. But this time, the notes were fluid, beautiful. It was Zachary Allen. Zachary had once been my classmate, a dear friend. But more than that, he was John Crowe's so-called white moonlight, the person he could never forget. He was an Omega, too, though his compatibility with John wasn't ideal. Back then, John had chosen to marry me instead, swayed by the influence of the Hart family. But that was a year ago. The Hart family collapsed. My parents, who had once cherished me as their treasure, were both gone. One leapt to their death, the other swallowed pills and followed. In a matter of days, I had lost everything worth living for. But the suffering hadn't stopped there. My dignity was trampled. My fingers broken. Remembering all of it made my chest tighten, a sharp ache spreading through me. My hands shook as I reached into my bag, pulling out a small pill bottle. In the 3rd month of the reformatory, the crushing despair had nearly destroyed me. They diagnosed me with severe depression. Since then, every day, medication was the only thread keeping me alive. I poured a few pills into my palm. My breathing was uneven. Just then, the piano outside fell silent. A knock sounded at my door. "Noah, it's me, Zachary. Are you in there?" The moment I heard his voice, I panicked. I shoved the pills into my mouth, swallowing them dry, and quickly hid the bottle out of sight. I quickly shoved the pill bottle deep into my pocket just as the door swung open. Zachary Allen stepped inside with that ever-gentle smile of his. "Noah, you're back? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I would have come to welcome you," he said softly, closing the distance between us as though he were a caring friend. His face leaned close, feigning worry. "Noah, what happened to you? You look so different. Life in the Omega Reformatory must have been hard on you." I stared at him, my chest tightening with disgust. Hard? Yes, it had been hell. But what right did he have to act concerned? I knew the truth. It was Zachary who had suggested to John Crowe that I should be sent away in the first place. He had always resented me. Resented that John had chosen me over him. When the Hart family collapsed, he hadn't hesitated for a second. He wanted me gone, ruined, crushed under his heel. And now he dared to show up here, pretending to care. No, he was only here to pour salt into my wounds. I lowered my gaze, refusing to meet his eyes. My voice was flat. "What are you doing here?" Zachary's smile widened. He reached for my hand, holding it delicately in his own. "What else?" "I'm here to make John hate you even more. You've sat in the position of Mrs. Crowe for far too long." Before I could react, footsteps echoed from outside. Zachary's eyes flashed with cunning. He suddenly yanked my wrist hard, forcing my hand against his shoulder, and then threw himself backward. He crashed onto the floor with a sickening thud. His pale hand instantly smeared red with blood where it scraped against the ground. Almost immediately, John Crowe's furious voice thundered from the doorway. "Noah Hart! How could you be so vicious? No wonder everyone says you're jealous that Zachary plays the piano better than you. You really disgust me." His glare burned into me like knives. I didn't argue. I didn't even try. What was the point? My stomach had already started twisting with waves of sharp pain. It was familiar. Too familiar. I must have taken too many pills earlier without realizing. My lips drained of color as I collapsed forward, clutching desperately at his trouser leg. "John, it hurts. My stomach, it hurts so much." But John only lifted Zachary into his arms, coldness etched in every line of his face. He kicked me hard in the chest, sending me sprawling. His eyes brimmed with contempt. Pathetic. Stop pretending. With that, he left, carrying Zachary tenderly, as though he were something precious. And Zachary, as he passed, he shot me a triumphant look, a flash of smug victory in his eyes. Blood surged up my throat. I choked, coughing until a dark pool spilled onto the floor. My vision swam, the colors around me bleeding away into gray. Maybe this was it. Maybe I could just die here. Wouldn't that be easier? My trembling hand pressed weakly against my chest. At least then, it wouldn't hurt anymore. But fate was cruel. A maid found me, pale and motionless, and rushed me to the hospital. A thick gastric tube was shoved down my throat, pumping the contents of my stomach. Agony, nausea, suffocation. I endured it all in silence, staring up at the harsh glare of the surgical light above me. And all I could think was, right now, John was probably still with Zachary. He never could stand to see him suffer, not even for a moment. Somewhere between pain and haze, the light above me flickered, and then went out with a sharp pop. A young doctor removed his mask and leaned over me. His tone was grave. "Mr. Hart, your stomach is in terrible condition. If you keep abusing it like this, there's a high chance it could turn cancerous." My hand pressed against the faintly throbbing ache in my abdomen. My smile was bitter, hollow. "I'll be careful. The doctor left. I stayed in the hospital bed for 2 hours, saline dripping into my veins, before finally preparing myself to leave. The doctor had wanted me to stay for observation, but I couldn't. I was nearly broke. The only money I had left was the small sum my parents entrusted to me before they died. As for the bank card John Crowe had given me, I hadn't touched a single cent. I refused to owe him anything. After collecting my medicine, I lifted my head, only to freeze. Across the corridor, I locked eyes with John. He was supporting Zachary Allen, who leaned against him with practiced fragility. John's gaze slid over me, mocking, his lips curving in a cruel smile. "Noah, your performance really is thorough, isn't it?" Instinctively, I tightened my grip on the paper bag of pills, hiding it behind my back as I moved to walk away. That only drew his attention. His eyes flickered down, sharp and searching. He released Zachary's arm and strode toward me. Just before he reached me, Zachary clung to him again, voice soft and trembling. "John, I feel a little dizzy." John froze, then shifted smoothly, steadying him by the shoulders. Zachary let himself sink lightly into John's embrace, his lashes fluttering as he turned his head toward me. "Noah, don't misunderstand. I only leaned on him because I'm not feeling well. You're not upset, are you?" For a brief second, John seemed to remember that he was married. His face flickered with something unusual. He spoke, awkwardly, almost apologetically. "Noah, I'm only worried about Zachary." I forced a brittle smile, one that didn't reach my eyes. My voice came out hoarse. "It's fine. I don't mind. If there's nothing else, I'll go first." And with that, I turned my back on them, leaving John standing there, momentarily stunned. When I returned home, I didn't go back to the master bedroom. I carried my things into a guest room, quietly, without fuss. I was ready to sleep when the sound of footsteps reached me. Hurried. Deliberate. I hadn't expected John to come back that night. Shouldn't he be at Zachary's side? Maybe he'd forgotten something important, I thought vaguely, reaching for the door to close it. But before I could, the door pushed back firmly against my hand. John stood there, his face shadowed by an expression I hardly recognized. Anger, yes, but threaded with something else. Something dangerously close to concern. "Noah, why didn't you tell me you were sick?" In his hand was a medical report. My medical report. No wonder I couldn't find it earlier. My eyes flicked to it briefly, then away again. My voice was flat, drained. The doctor said it's nothing serious, just a small problem. But John didn't back down. He shoved his way into the room, his tall frame filling the space. "A small problem? Since when? You used to cry over a cut on your finger." I almost laughed at that. Yes, the old Noah Hart would have run to him, sobbing at the slightest pain, demanding comfort, desperate for love. But that boy was long gone. I was no longer the pampered son of the Hart family. Now I was just a survivor, someone who knew better than to hope for gentleness. And wasn't this exactly what John wanted? Wasn't this the result he'd pushed me toward? So why did he look unsatisfied now? Strange, so very strange. His shadow loomed over me as he stepped closer, his nearness suffocating. My instinct screamed. I ducked my head and took a step back, keeping distance between us. "You were the one who told me not to bother you unless it was serious," I whispered. "When did I ever say that?" John faltered. His eyes narrowed, something flickering behind them. And then I saw it, the memory dawning in his expression. That day, the third day after I had been sent to the Omega Reformatory. Because I refused to obey their orders, the whip soaked in brine lashed across my back again and again. Back then, my body was still soft, untested. By nightfall, I was burning with fever. There were no medicines in that place. No warm water, nothing but concrete walls and cold eyes. Whether I survived or not was left entirely to fate. I remember thinking, this is it. I'm going to die here. Summoning what little strength I had, I borrowed a phone and called John Crowe, begging him to take me away. But his voice, cold and careless, sliced deeper than the whip had. "Noah, you're just being dramatic. A little fever and you're already crying to me? Don't call again unless it's something serious." Then the line went dead. He left me there, in hell, to fend for myself. I endured 3 days and 3 nights of agony before I staggered past death's door. And from that moment on, I stopped expecting anything from John Crowe. Yet tonight, his words almost lit something in me again. Something small. Something pathetic. "The things I said back then don't matter," John murmured. "You need a hospital. With your stomach in this condition, how could you think of not staying?" He reached for me as if to lift me in his arms. But then, his phone rang. a special ringtone, one he'd set just for Zachary Allen. My chest tightened. I knew before he even answered that Zachary would never tolerate John leaving him to come to me. And I was right. When John returned from the call, his expression was ice. "Noah, you disgust me. You forged these medical records just to trick me? From now on, I won't believe another word you say." He flung the papers to the floor, the door slamming shut behind him. He trusted Zachary more than he had ever trusted me. He always had. He never gave me a chance to explain. Slowly, I sank into the corner by the door, pulling my knees to my chest. That fragile spark in my heart snuffed out completely. "Noah, you promised yourself you wouldn't hurt anymore, so why does it still ache?" After that night, John and I rarely crossed paths. Even when we did, we exchanged no words, or worse, I was met with his cold scorn. I didn't explain myself. I no longer cared what he thought of me. What I did care about was my body. The medicine kept me stable for the most part, but the headaches came often, sharper each time, and more, pieces of my memory slipped away. Today was one of those days. I rushed to my psychiatrist's office, only to be told at the front desk that I had come on the wrong date. Embarrassed, I left, the headache worsening with every step home. By the time I decided to stop and rest, the world exploded. A deafening crash, a burst of light, blood blooming across my forehead, pain, then only dizzy silence, and then something strange. My soul seemed to float free, watching from above as my body was rushed into the emergency ward. I saw myself being wheeled away, and I saw once again John Crowe choosing not to believe me, not to save me. "Hello? Are you Mr. Crowe, Noah Hart's husband? He's been in a car accident. We need a family member's signature for the critical care notice." John's brows drew together. His voice was sharp, impatient. What trick is he playing this time? "Tell Noah I won't be fooled." The line cut out. "Hello, sir? Hello." The nurse's voice was lost to static. John dropped the phone onto the couch and, scowling, flicked on the television, frustration clouding his face. No one expected the news broadcast to cut straight to it. On the television, the anchor's voice was grave. "Breaking news, this afternoon, a major car accident occurred on Mingdi Road. A male Omega was critically injured and is now undergoing emergency surgery." For nearly 10 seconds, John Crowe stared, unblinking, at the fleeting image of the mangled car. Then, his composure cracked. Snatching his coat from the rack, he bolted out the door and raced toward the hospital. By the time he arrived, John was drenched in sweat, his breath ragged. He seized a nurse's arm with trembling hands. "Nurse, please, tell me, is the patient inside named Noah Hart?" The nurse looked at him, then nodded. "Yes, that's him. Poor thing. I've never seen a patient in such a state. Besides the injuries from today's crash, his body is already riddled with scars and sickness. Old wounds, broken bones, his fingers alone have been shattered and set more than once. Honestly, I don't know if he'll survive the night." Her words blurred together, but John barely heard a thing. His grip tightened, desperate. "What do you mean? What injuries? What illnesses? Tell me!" The nurse winced at his grasp, narrowing her eyes in suspicion. "And you are?" "I'm his alpha. I'm his husband." At that, her expression shifted from pity to disgust. "Then you should know. He suffers from severe gastric disease and chronic depression. His body is covered in whip marks and puncture wounds, like someone's been using him as a pincushion. And his hands, none of his fingers have healed properly. You look polished, respectable. But don't you know, domestic abuse is a crime." John's face drained of color, his eyes turning red. His hands slipped limply to his sides as he whispered, broken. He wasn't lying to me? But he looked fine. How could he? How could he be carrying so many scars? From my place, adrift, watching like a ghost, I laughed bitterly. Even now, even standing outside my hospital room, John still thought I was deceiving him. "Noah Hart, you really were a fool, weren't you? To ever love a man like this." At that moment, another nurse burst into the corridor, panic etched across her face. "Head nurse, the blood bank's empty. We're out of stock. What do we do?" The words struck John like a thunderclap. He jerked as though waking from a nightmare, his voice booming. "What do you mean there's no blood? My wife is in there bleeding out, and you tell me you have nothing?" The young nurse flinched at his fury, but before she could respond, John was already yanking up his sleeve. "Take mine. My blood type matches his. Draw as much as you need." The head nurse hesitated only a second, then grabbed his arm and rushed him to the donation room. Inside, the needle pierced his vein. Bag after bag filled. By the end, John had given over 800 cc, nearly half his strength. He clung to the edge of the bed, his face ghost white, his lips trembling. He won't die now, right? The head nurse held the bag of blood, pausing before answering. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. We can't promise anything. John's eyes reddened again, rimmed with a pain he'd never admit aloud. But watching from the corner of the room, unseen, I felt nothing. No pity, no gratitude. Only cold amusement. He didn't want me alive, he never did. And now what? He wants to act like the devoted husband sacrificing himself at the last minute? Please, spare me. Even a dog would spit on such late-blooming affection. I spat the words in my mind, and suddenly John sneezed, hard. He glanced over his shoulder, brows knitting, as though he'd felt something, as though my ghost had brushed past him. Shaking his head, he dismissed the thought, then pulled his phone from his pocket. The call connected. On the other end came Zachary Allen's soft, expectant voice. Hello? Is something wrong? Why are you calling me? John Crowe's voice was ice over the phone. Tell me the truth. That so-called Omega Correctional Facility, is it even a legal institution? On the other end, Zachary Allen faltered, panic lacing his words. Oh, of course it is. John, why are you even asking me this? Did Noah tell you something again? But John didn't answer. He closed his eyes, his jaw tight, and cut the call short. A moment later he dialed another number, his tone deadly calm. I don't care what it takes. Dig into it. I want the truth, and I want it immediately. Time blurred. When the doctors finally wheeled me out of the operating room, John was there, pacing like a madman. He's alive, one of the doctors said, removing his mask. For now, he's out of immediate danger. But if he remains in a coma too long, there's a high risk he'll never wake up. He could remain in a persistent vegetative state. John snapped. His fist shot out, seizing the doctor by the collar, eyes burning with a frantic desperation. He has to wake up. He has to. But the doctor only shook his head, voice weary. We've done everything we can. The rest depends on him. You need to prepare yourself. The words gutted him. His grip loosened, strength bleeding away, until at last he staggered back, half collapsing against the wall. For a long, suffocating moment, he just stood there, head bowed. Then, suddenly, he raised his eyes, his voice a roar. Get out! All of you! Get the hell out! The corridor fell silent. One by one, the staff scattered, leaving only John and the faint beeping of the monitor beside my bed. He moved to my side, his hands trembling as he reached for mine. But what he saw there stopped him cold. The hands that once played piano with brilliance, the hands I had always cherished with pride, were ruined. Every finger carried scars, old breaks, healed wrong, calluses, burns, punctures. They hardly resembled human hands anymore. A sound tore from John's throat, half sob, half breath. His tears fell in hot drops against my lifeless fingers, and still he didn't let go. For days he sat like that, clutching my hand as if it were a lifeline. Meals went untouched, water barely sipped. He spoke constantly, words tumbling into the void, hoping my unconscious mind could hear. He spoke of the past, of us, of a time when things weren't so broken. But eventually his words faltered, because he knew. He knew how far he'd strayed, how cruel he'd become. Once there was love between us. Our families had been inseparable, his parents and mine, lifelong friends. When tragedy struck and his parents died, my own took him in. From that day forward, John and I grew up side by side, childhood sweethearts in everything but name. He had stood up for me countless times. He took punishments meant for me, fought boys twice his size for me, and once, reckless and fearless, nearly drowned trying to pull me from the ocean's current. Back then, when John looked at me, his eyes were full of stars. So when talk of marriage came, no one questioned it. It was the most natural thing in the world. But everything changed the day Zachary Allen entered our lives. He whispered poison into John's ear, urging him to find himself, to stop letting my family dictate his future. He spun lies, saying the Hart family's wealth was built by draining the Crowe family dry. The cruelest part? John believed him. He never knew the truth, that by the time we acquired the Crowe business, it was already on the brink of collapse. My father stepped in, not for profit, but because he couldn't stand to watch his best friend's life's work crumble. We didn't gain from it. We lost money. But father never breathed a word. He wanted to spare John's pride, and now that truth lay bare before him. I wanted to laugh when I saw John's face, stunned, shattered, stripped of certainty. But instead I only wondered, would he regret it, now that he finally knew? Regret that he had never trusted me? Never trusted my family? Or was it already far too late for regrets? He regretted it, terribly, desperately. John Crowe moved with thunderous force, tearing down the so-called Omega Correctional Facility and dismantling everything Zachary Allen had built, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of him. For me, John even had my piano, the one I once loved more than anything, brought into the hospital room. Day after day, he sat by my side, his large hand wrapped around my fragile wrist, massaging my ruined fingers again and again as though willing life back into them. "Noah," his voice cracked with a pleading tenderness, "you've loved the piano since you were a child. I've cleaned your fingers for you. Wake up. Play for me again, will you? You promised. Whenever I wanted to hear you play, you would." But his words grew weaker and weaker, until his voice broke entirely into muffled sobs. And then, something strange happened. I felt a sudden pull, as though I were being dragged into a dark current. My consciousness slipped away, swallowed whole. When it returned, I opened my eyes to find a man, a stranger, sitting at my bedside, weeping uncontrollably. I stared at him, bewildered. Who are you?" The man's expression shifted wildly. First joy, then despair, then something colder, sharper, almost resolute. He gripped my shoulders with both hands. "Noah, it doesn't matter if you don't remember me. We still have a long future ahead of us." But the intimacy of his touch made something inside me recoil. I didn't know why. Could this man, this John Crowe, who claimed to be my husband, really be part of my future? The days after my awakening blurred into routine. For more than 2 weeks, John hardly left my side. He hovered over me endlessly, caring for me as though I were made of glass. He fed me, washed me, massaged my hands, tucked me into bed. Everything except follow me to the bathroom. His devotion was overwhelming. And yet, no matter how attentive he was, I couldn't shake the quiet chill I felt toward him. A subtle distance hummed in my chest every time he drew near. If he was truly my husband, why did my mind hold not a single memory of him? The more I tried to force the pieces together, the sharper the pain grew, stabbing at my temples until sweat beaded across my forehead. "Noah." John rushed forward as my face paled, his hand reaching to brush back the damp strands of hair clinging to my brow. But instinctively, I raised my arm and blocked him. "Mr. Crowe," I whispered softly, "I'm recovering well enough now. I can take care of these things myself. You don't need to trouble yourself further." I had called him that for days now. Mr. Crowe, polite, formal, distant. The light in his eyes dimmed, pain flickering there before he could hide it. "Noah, you always called me Brother John when we were young." I lowered my gaze, unable to explain the strange aversion twisting inside me. At last I muttered only 2 words. "I'm sorry." He masked the wound quickly, forcing composure. From his pocket, he produced a gold-embossed card. "Forget it. Here, this is an invitation to a concert. Your body hasn't fully recovered, so it's your choice whether you want to go." I couldn't remember much of my life, but my love for the piano had not vanished. Tentatively, I lifted my fingers. They were stiff, clumsy, nothing like the hands I once had. A shadow of shame crossed my heart, but behind it a flicker of courage burned. I wanted to try. On the day of the concert, I slipped backstage, nerves thrumming through me like taut strings. And then, "Noah?" A voice called from behind me, warm and clear. "Senior, would you play a duet with me?" I turned and saw a young man, handsome, confident. He introduced himself as my junior from university. Not just a fellow student, he said, but once my closest partner on stage. Together, we'd swept national competitions, shoulder to shoulder. He even pulled out old photographs, us at the piano, smiling, victorious. Then, almost shyly, he suggested we change tonight's program. Instead of the planned piece, he wanted us to perform one of my compositions, the piece I had written years ago. "You never agreed to play it with me before," he admitted, almost wistful. "Never even let me hear it. But tonight, I want to make that dream come true." His words unlocked something in me. A door creaked open, just a sliver. Behind it, a haze of memories I couldn't fully grasp. Something about that piece tugged at me, sharp and dangerous, as though tied to a past I wasn't ready to face. But the concert was starting. There was no time to hesitate. In the front row, John Crowe sat with a bouquet of flowers in his arms. When his eyes landed on the young man behind me, his face darkened. By the time my hands touched the keys, John's expression had sunk into something colder, stormier. The performance began. My junior and I played in harmony, 2 pianos, 2 voices, weaving one seamless song. The music filled the hall like light breaking through storm clouds. The audience erupted in applause when we finished. But John was gone. Only his flowers remained, left on the empty chair like an accusation. Backstage, I found him waiting. His eyes were red, blazing with something raw. "Noah," he said, his voice breaking. "I remember you once told me this piece, you would only ever play it for me." I stared at him, startled. Would I have said something so sentimental, so foolish? I wasn't sure. I didn't remember. "It's just a song," I said evenly. "I played it for the audience, for everyone. And besides, you were in the audience too, weren't you?" My words struck him like a blow. His jaw clenched, his chest heaved, and in the next breath his large hand clamped around my arm. "Come home with me. I'll tell you everything." But before he could pull me away, my junior stepped forward, grabbing my wrist. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm. "Senior already promised he'd have dinner with me." John's grip tightened. He yanked me into his arms, glaring down at the other man. "I think you're mistaken. Mr. Allen, was it? If anything, you should be calling me brother-in-law." The air grew taut, sharp as glass. My pulse spiked with irritation. His sudden possessiveness, his assumption of rights over me, made my skin prickle. I shoved free of his hold. "Mr. Crowe," I said coldly, "I've already promised him dinner." Without another glance, I took my junior's hand and walked away. At the restaurant, the tension drained from me. My junior spoke with an easy warmth, drawing me into stories of our university years. He described the endless hours of practice our teacher forced on us, the frantic train rides to competitions, the late nights spent arranging music together. His laughter made it sound like those days had been golden. But every so often, he would stop, words hanging unsaid, eyes dimming with something he chose not to reveal. And inside me, a storm brewed. The more I learned, the less I knew. The questions pressed down harder, threatening to swallow me whole. John might claim he would tell me everything, but whether or not he did, I knew I had to uncover the truth myself. And fate, it seemed, was one step ahead of me. Before I could return to John, another figure stepped into my path. An old classmate, Zachary Allen. He flagged down my car, refusing to let it pass. "We need to talk," he said calmly, though his eyes carried something darker. When I didn't respond, he leaned closer, his voice low and deliberate. "Noah, don't you want to know what really happened in the past?" I turned the car around, and soon Zachary and I were seated across from each other in a quiet cafe. Only then did I truly see him. He had aged, more than I expected. Once his hair had been his pride, thick, dark, meticulously kept. Now it was coarse, unkempt, streaked with exhaustion. Catching my gaze, he gave a crooked smile and ran a hand across his face. "Noah Hart, look at me now. Are you satisfied with what I've become?" Bitterness dripped from his voice. His eyes, once sharp, were now sunken, but no less venomous. He said it was my fault. That everything he had lost, the orchestra, his future as a pianist, was because of me. "If you hadn't poisoned John Crowe against me," Zachary sneered, "I never would have been expelled. I wouldn't be rotting here, reduced to teaching scraps just to survive." His expression twisted further, rage curdling into something darker. "Noah, why is it you're always the lucky one? Even heaven bends for you. You get to forget the pain. You get to start fresh." "No." His smile stretched cruelly. "I won't let you have that piece." He flung a stack of photographs onto the table. "You wanted the truth? Then look. Once you've seen these, I don't think you'll be able to forget again." I hesitated, then picked one up. My fist tightened instantly. The photo showed a male Omega, half naked, body lashed with whip marks, his face contorted in agony. And that face, it was mine. The world tilted. A thunderclap exploded inside my skull, fragments of memory bursting like fireworks. My fingers ached, every joint screaming with phantom pain. I dropped the photo as if it burned me. My lips trembled. "You're lying." Zachary laughed low, cold. "Lying? Then take a look at this." He tossed me his phone. A video was already playing. My breath caught. The images were unbearable. Humiliation, cruelty, degradation. My knuckles cracked audibly as I clenched my fists. My mind spiraled into chaos. This isn't me. This isn't me. But the voice inside my head roared louder. It is. When I came to, I was no longer in the cafe. I was back in the villa, on the wide, silken bed that smelled faintly of John. I pressed a hand to my temple. The memories were relentless, rolling over me like wheels, crushing bone and soul. My feet carried me to the piano. I placed trembling fingers on the keys. The first note rang out, and suddenly my heart stilled, calm, steady. The music flowed, carrying the storm away, if only for a moment. When the final chord faded, I closed my fist over the keys. Maybe it was time to stop running. to be brave. I rang for the maid. My voice was quiet but firm. "Where is he?" She bowed. "Sir is in the basement." I declined her attempt to escort me and made my way down alone. The moment I opened the basement door, Zachary's furious shouting greeted me. "John, why is he the only one you see? Just because your compatibility rate is higher with Noah. Because he—" I froze, his words stabbing deep. What had I done to deserve such hatred? When Zachary was broke in college, I found him work. When he couldn't afford a piano, I gave him one. When he dreamed of joining the orchestra, it was my recommendation that opened the door. And still, he hated me. Not just hated, he betrayed me, stole my alpha, sold me into hell, unforgivable. Smack! The sound of a heavy slap cut his rant short, and silence followed. The slap didn't come from John Crowe. It came from me. Zachary froze, one hand clutching his cheek in disbelief. "Noah, you actually hit me?" I stepped closer, my voice cold, my hand striking his face again. Harder this time. "Zachary Allen, after everything I've done for you, 2 slaps aren't even close to interest on the debt you owe. And hear me well. I won't just hit you. I'll make sure you suffer 100 times worse than what you put me through." He stumbled backward, palms braced against the floor, scrambling away from me. "What are you going to do?" Don't come closer. I'll call the police." I scoffed. "You think I'd sink to your level? That I'd use the same cheap, filthy tricks you did?" I threw his own phone at him. It smacked against his chest before falling into his lap. "You've already committed a crime. Distributing private videos? That's enough to put you in prison for years. Don't worry. I won't dirty my hands any further on someone like you." I turned and walked out. John was waiting, his long strides catching up with me almost instantly. "Noah, please, punishing Zachary is my responsibility. Your body hasn't fully recovered yet." I didn't even glance at him. My voice was flat, final. "My life is not yours to manage. I'll draft the divorce papers and send them to your inbox. All you need to do is sign them." For a moment, his tall frame stiffened, as though struck by invisible force. But what did that matter to me? I had already made up my mind. Nothing, not his silence, not his regret, would stop me from leaving the Crowe estate and beginning again. I moved out the very next day. True to my word, I sent him the divorce agreement. But instead of receiving a signed document in return, I opened my door to find John standing there, roses in hand. "Noah," he said softly, his eyes raw, "I don't agree to this divorce." The bouquet was made of perfume roses, once my favorite. But that was a different version of me, a different time. Now, my heart leaned toward sunflowers, bright, resilient, always turning toward the light. I pushed the flowers back into his arms. "John, Zachary has already paid for what he did to me. But the person who hurt me most, the one who broke my heart, was you. Tell me, what punishment have you received?" He flinched, words caught in his throat. For a long time he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was unsteady. "No, I admit it. I was wrong to believe Zachary's lies. I've done so many things I can never take back. But please, give me a chance to make it right. Or punish me if you must. Just don't leave me." My reply was quiet but resolute. I reached into my bag and pulled out the offer letter from Vienna, the invitation to study abroad I had dreamed of. "You're too late, John. I don't have time to punish you, because I finally have something greater to live for." His hand trembled as he gripped the paper. His lips curved into a desperate, brittle smile. "Noah, if Vienna is where your heart lies, then I'll support you. Maybe we both need time apart. If you'd let me, I could even go with you." I shook my head. The Noah standing before him now no longer needed anyone to carry him forward. I had my own dream, my own strength, my own life. I sighed. "Sign the papers, John. At least that way, I can keep one last shred of good memory of you." John Crowe saw that my decision would not waver. He drew in a deep, trembling breath, then pressed the bouquet firmly into my arms. His voice cracked, soft and tired, like something inside him had broken. "Don't reject me. Take it? Think of it as my blessing, Noah, for the life ahead of you." I didn't want to, but his eyes left me no room to argue. So I accepted the roses. Only after he walked away did I turn on my heel and toss them into the trash. I didn't want John anymore, and I certainly didn't need his flowers. A few days later, his divorce agreement arrived. Most of it was exactly as I had written, except for one thing. In the section on property division, he had altered my original terms. Where I had insisted on leaving with nothing, John had given me everything. His personal assets, and even half the shares of his company. I called him immediately. His answer was calm, almost rehearsed. "It's all marital property, Noah. By right, half of it belongs to you." So be it. I saw no reason to argue. After the papers were finalized, I sold every asset and transferred all of it into a foundation for abused children. As for the shares, those I kept. Not out of sentiment, but practicality. I would need the dividends to build my future. With everything settled, I booked my ticket to Vienna. John asked to see me once more. I refused. At the crowded airport, he appeared anyway. Wearing the old overcoat I had once given him, he searched the terminal, desperate for a glimpse of me. But my flight had already left hours earlier. Our lives, like two misaligned trains, kept passing each other by. Always missing. Always too late. Epilogue. By the 3rd year after my departure, John's health had begun to decline. Friends urged him, if you still love him, go after him. Find Noah before it's too late. He only smiled faintly and shook his head. No, I don't want to disturb his life. But the truth was simpler and crueler. He no longer had the courage. He feared what he might see if he searched. Me, smiling in the arms of another alpha, truly happy, finally free. If that happened, he knew he wouldn't be able to stop himself from ruining it all over again. And Noah Hart would hate him more than ever. So instead, John poured all his devotion into the perfume roses I had once planted at the villa. He often sat among them in silence, remembering the afternoons when I would water each flower one by one, waiting patiently for him to come home. But he rarely came home. And when he did, sometimes he brought Zachary with him, cutting me deeper than any blade. Every hope I once held for him had ended in disappointment, and disappointment in time gave way to despair. So I stopped waiting, stopped watering, stopped caring. And when I left the roses behind too. The only things I took were my piano and my love for music. In the years after, John tried to fill the silence. He learned to play the piano himself. Sleepless, he would play through the night until dawn, his mind unraveling, his body weakening. On the streets, his thoughts were so clouded that he often mistook strangers for me. But no matter how many faces he chased, none of them were mine. Disappointment again and again taught him the truth. He had lost Noah Hart long ago. And this time, there was no way back.